Hello, Booktube. For a brief moment, there was peace. A light snow fell, and both sides came up out of their trenches and kicked around a football, sang some songs, showed each other snapshots, and the world breathed a sigh of relief that perhaps, maybe, the OGBG, the Old Geezers Book Group Book Haul Wars were finally over, and that we could build a new world. But it was not to be. The Hall Wars have continued. while I was gone from the world, from BookTube, the Hall Wars continued. Jason Harrigan, whose channel name I think now is Jason Hates Books, and really, who wouldn't, since they're so annoying. He had a book haul, and his book haul was such an egregious breaking of the peace that the government of Ireland imposed a lockdown so that he can't do it anymore. But Sean Standfast has returned to the fray despite having been made thrice redundant. And, of course, that perennial backwoods aggressor, Mark Richardson, has continued to foist book hauls on a virtually daily basis. Now that I'm back, now that that brief, blessed truce has been trounced upon and thrown into the mud, I've decided to re-enter the wars myself. I went back to the Brattle Bookshop in Boston, my first trip of 2021, and I got a bunch of books. Rather inordinate amount of books that I want to show you today. We'll start off with another failure that carries over from 2020. In 2020, of course, like the rest of you, I did my level best to try somehow to understand Brian at Bookish. Now, I failed. He's just a wicked piss of weird, as we used to say on M Street in South Boston. But I'm going to continue to try to understand him in 2021, and I'm taking a different angle, as it were, here at the start of 2021. I found this book. It's The Longest Silence by Tom McGuane. This is a life in fishing. This is the great novelist Tom McGuane's book about fishing, about his lifelong obsession with killing fish. I have known Brian, of course, at Bookish is an avid fisherman. I have known many men who fish. I've never yet known in my life a woman who enjoyed it, but I've known many men in my life who enjoyed going out and fishing. Quite a few of those men, you got the strong impression the thing they enjoyed most about it is that no women was present. But I've known a few of those men, just a handful in my life, who didn't use hooks. They didn't use bait. They liked the meditative aspect of it. And one particular person who wrote a couple of books you may have read, who liked very much to go out fishing, as he put it. But what he would do was, he didn't even bring a rod. He would just bring a bag of breadcrumbs. His idea of fishing was to go out and feed the fish, not have them feed him. But most of the people that I've known who indulged in this quote-unquote sport do it the traditional way, which is they do their best to trick a helpless animal that they absolutely do not need for food into impaling itself on a metal spike so that they can slowly exhaust it in agony until it's so exhausted that it doesn't resist being yanked into the boat, where they can then club it to death. Go team. Needless to say, I'm not a fan of any kind of hunting. If you want the thrill of a hunt as a human being, then level the playing field. And I might point out that there have been many instances, including many instances in my own library, of encounters between men and men-sized fish when the playing field is level. Those fish are called sharks, and the results only turn one way. So you want the thrill of that hunt, you go right ahead. But if you're going to take a carbine that can punch a 6-inch hole through a concrete wall out into the woods in order to wake a bear out of hibernation, and shoot it with that thing, if that's your idea of a thrill of a sport, then, well, anyway, I love McGuane's prose, and I'm sure, not read a single thing in here. So we will see if it gives me any insight into him, if it gives me any insight into fishing, and if it gives me any insight into Brian Bookish. not hoping for the best, but at least I'll get a ton of Tom McGuane prose that I've never encountered before, which will be great. Then we have a book, I've read this before, I love it, and it's an author whose prose I know very well. This is a collection of classical meditations by the great classicist Bernard Knox. The classic tradition and its renewal makes this sound like a book. It largely isn't. It's largely just a repurposed collection of period pieces of deadline prose. But that's okay. I had this once upon a time when it first came out, and I got rid of it a long, long time ago. I might not keep it, but I'm very much looking forward to reading the stuff in here again. Bernard Knox has a golden touch when writing about the classics, as you will know, if a lot of you will have read, most of the time when I praise a classicist, I'm talking to a very small audience of people. But in this particular case, he wrote the introductions to Robert Fagel's translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey that were read by hundreds of thousands of people. Many of them involuntarily for school, but quite a few not. Quite a few people, when they reach for the Iliad, when they think, oh, it's time for me to read the Odyssey, they find the Fagel's translation. The Penguin Classic Deluxe editions of those are absolutely gorgeous. Just gorgeous. And right there at the front of those translations, 50 pages each, is Bernard Knox introducing the work and doing a great job of it. So, but he's fantastic, and he and Peter Green are my favorite classicists, so I will definitely reread this. And then these next two, actually quite a few of the things on here are rereads, but quite a few are not. These next two are rereads. The first one is won the Pulitzer Prize, was a Book of the Month Club, was a special slipcase Folio Society edition, was a paperback that sold like crazy, made its author a boatload, no pun intended, of money, and is totally verboten now because of its subject matter. And that is Admiral of the Ocean Sea by the great Samuel Eliot Morison, the great American historian and biographer Samuel Eliot Morison. This is his big book of Christopher Columbus, and there have been many, many, many editions of this book, but this is the one that I like. So I was very happy to find this it's a big, sturdy trade paperback. I'm very happy to find it. Unlike a lot of other trade paperbacks this size, this is well made. So it will stand a reread, and I want to reread this. I admit, part of me wants to reread this book in 2021 as a reaction to fascist censorship of 2020. I was hoping in the fall of 2020 that maybe we were putting that behind us, but I have the strong suspicion that it's here to stay, and that if anything, it's going to be even stronger in 2021. And that woke censorship revolves around the fact that Columbus was not a good person. And so we shouldn't read about him, and we shouldn't commemorate him, and we shouldn't study him, and we shouldn't even let his name pass our lips. And I don't need that as an excuse to reread. This is a great biography, so I don't need that as an excuse to reread it. But nevertheless, it has been a long time since I reread this, so it's due anyway. But nevertheless, as long as we're on the subject, as long as I've dragged you kicking and screaming onto the subject, I might as well point out again here at the beginning of 2021, for the cheap seats and just for the emphasis of it all, that deciding who you will and will not read based on the author's gender or race or ethnicity or sexuality, if you decide who you will read and who you will not read on the basis of those things, you're a bigot. And if you decide who you will read about, or whose books you will read, or both, based on how much you think you might personally have liked the author in high school, you're a child. And if you are a reading adult, you should not want to be either bigoted or childish. You should not want to be those things. And so if those things in here at the dawn of 2021 still guide or guard your reading, you should have a long, cold talk with yourself and stop it right away. Stop that nonsense right away. Stop that nonsense right away. So if a science fiction and fantasy author believes right down to his bones that it's absolutely immoral for gay people to marry, And you want to say, well, I'm not going to read his books then. Anyway, Samuel Eliot Morison admires what there is to admire in Christopher Columbus. He excoriates what there is to excoriate in Columbus. That's quite a bit. Columbus was a wretched person. But in the course of doing those things, which are incidental to a biography, he also writes a great biography. So I was very happy to find. Didn't have a copy of this because this is the version I wanted. Of the many, many versions of this book that have come out, this is the one I wanted. So I found it, and that's great. And that wasn't all of Samuel Eliot Morison that I found. I also found a slightly faded, unfortunately, but illustrated hardcover of his Maritime History of Massachusetts. Now, this is the hardcover of this volume, which exists also in one of those old Time Inc. trade paperbacks with the really stiff cardboard covers. I've had it in that version. I've also had it as a sort of there's another kind, a very distinctive kind of trade paperback from 60 years ago with a very matte, clothy kind of cover. I've had it in both of those, and it doesn't hold up because I keep going back to this. I love this author. Absolutely love this author. I also very much liked this author. Personally, we were friends. And my only complaint with this book, finding it in a hardcover is fantastic. And finding it in a nice illustrated hardcover, so much the better, because the paperbacks don't have illustrations. My only quibble here is that this is almost where I want to be, and the Brattle will provide. I will. All these things came from the Brattle Bookshop in downtown Boston. They have a regular stream of books of all types, so I will find what I want. What I want is this book, this exact hardcover, only with the dust jacket. Because here the white lettering there has been mostly rubbed away. So on the shelf, I'm going to have to remember what this is. I'm not going to be able to tell what it is unless I were to use some sort of paste or paint or something to fill in the grooves of those letters so that I can read the title one way or another. I know that a copy with the dust jacket must exist out there somewhere. This is from almost 100 years ago, and if you look at it, the title and the subject matter, you might think, oh God, how incredibly boring such a book may be. But as I've mentioned many times before on this channel, Morison isn't that way. He looks that way. On the outside, he looks that way. And then you start to read him, and you're just all idea of that goes away completely. He is first and foremost a storyteller. And I don't think I have even a battered old broken trade paperback of this thing. I think I just didn't have anything at all. With Morison, I like to wait until I find just the copy that I want. I don't know if the fact that this and Admiral of the Ocean Sea were both at the Brattle at the same time, I've mentioned before, sometimes that means that they bought a whole collection from somebody and it's coming up out of the basement piecemeal. If that's the case, if there's a lot more Samuel Eliot Morison in my future at the Brattle, I won't object to that. This 2021 may be the year when I finally break down and get the whole of his multi-volume, 20-volume history of the U.S. Navy during World War II, which is great. He condensed it into a one-volume work called The Two-Ocean War, which is a fantastic recension of that work. But the whole 2020, the whole multi-volume set is an amazing reading experience on its own. And that whole set does routinely turn up at the Brattle. So I might do that. I might hope for that. And if that happens, if that does appear, I might get that and then reread it. I haven't reread that thing in a long time. But this has some choice stories in it. Just choice. This next one is a Folio Society, an old Folio Society that I found at the Brattle, of a book that I think I've heard praised enormously on Sean the Bookmaniac's channel. This is J.L. Carr's A Month in the Country. Boy, this is a lovely Folio Society edition here. That sometimes the Folio Society editions show up on the sale carts at the Brattle. Not often. The Brattle is a used bookstore. They are a fully functional 3-story used bookstore. And you can shop in there to your heart's content and find a million things. But there's also thousands and thousands of books outside in a sale lot right next door for $1, $3, and $5. And I very seldom shop anywhere else. I usually spend most of my time out in the sale lot. and then I'll go into the store. I'll look around in the store for very pointed things, because you can do that inside the store. You can say, all right, well, in addition to everything that I found in the sale lot, I also want this particular book on butterflies. So I'll go up to the nature section and I'll see if this particular book on butterflies is there. You can't do that with the sale lot. Or you can, but it would be a waste of time. You won't. Not only will you not find what the one particular thing you're looking for, but you won't find anything. You'll leave empty-handed if you try to bully the gods that way. There's a huge number of folio societies inside the store, but I never get them. This one was $1, so I grabbed it for a reread. Because the whole time, I think it was Sean the Book Maniac. Maybe one of you can remind me if I'm wrong about that. I seem to remember him and a bunch of people connected with his channel singing its praises. And I love it. But I didn't read it when all that praise singing was going on. So maybe I need to now. This next one is a treat. The type of thing that you find regularly at the Brattle that you don't find at normal used bookstores. Just don't. This is by Arthur Train, and it's Puritan's Progress. And this is a history of his, sort of an anecdotal history of his, of sort of the moral and also the moralizing history of the United States. I had to reinforce this thing because it was falling apart. I barely got it back here in one piece. But this is not just a history of the Puritans. This is also the history of what is colloquially known as Puritanism. And it's a hoot. Arthur Train is just a terrific writer. Just terrific. And was, believe it or not, he's a great Boston writer, of course. All the Boston writers are terrific writers. But believe it or not, once upon a time, he was incredibly famous. You look at him now, you hear that name, you've never heard of him before. Once upon a time, he created a fictional character who's now completely forgotten. And once upon a time, if you'd asked anybody, any bookstore worker, any reader, general reader, whether or not this character will ever be forgotten, they said no. Same level as Father Brown or Sherlock Holmes, no one will ever forget Ephraim Tutt. And no one remembers him now. No one remembers. Arthur Train was a lawyer, in addition to being a writer, and he created a very anecdotal, canny, sort of sharper than he looks old lawyer, a codgy old lawyer, named Ephraim Tutt. And it was a huge hit. Readers loved it, absolutely loved it. Ate up those books. There were so many stories, so many novels, so many anthologies of collected Tutt and Tutt. That are all gone now, completely forgotten, like they never happened. And I love those books, absolutely love them. What I wouldn't give to find a bunch of those, or even just one anthology of Tutt stories and novellas would be so nice. And again, that's exactly what I thought. I haven't read this thing, and I don't think I've read the whole of this ever. Although I loved the Tutt book, same as everybody else. But when I saw this, in addition to thinking, ooh, me wanty, and grabbing it, I also thought, well, the same thing. What if somebody who had this had a bunch of those anthologies or a bunch of those individual novels? What if they are going to make their appearance at the Brattle? No one cares about them now. I'm sure they're not collectible. This is probably more collectible than any of the Tutt books, so they'll just immediately go out to the sale lot, probably. I will keep an eye out for it, and if it happens, I will let you know. Then this next one is, this is also something that you're only ever going to find at a shop like the Brattle. You're not going to find this at your local Annie's Book Swap. It's just not going to happen. This is Edward Gordon Craig, who was... All right, considering how many children, legitimate and illegitimate, he had, considering how many offspring he had, it's going to seem a little funny for me to say this, but nevertheless, he was the gayest straight man in the world, probably in the history of the world. This is his book, Index to the Story of My Days. Look at this thing, Leah. That's his mother. And his mother was Ellen Terry, the greatest Shakespearean actress of her day, and the leading lady to Henry Irving. And Craig literally grew up in the theater, and came to know and be almost an adopted son to Irving, and went on to become a poobah in the theater himself as an actor, as a director, as a set designer, as a producer, all kinds of stuff like that. But he was, talk about not wanting to know him or sit with him in high school. He was an unbelievable jerk, and got worse as time went on. He lived to be like 100, and he wrote this when he was really old. He wrote this book when he was in his late 80s, I think. This I grabbed. He did that sketch of his mother, but I grabbed this because it's full of it's full of illustrations, just tons of them, and not only black and white photos, but also sketches, portraits, things like that. I wonder if this. I was going to say I wonder if there's a portrait of him, but knowing what he was like, there will certainly be a portrait of him. Yes, okay. That is our author as a young man. He was beautiful, and oh wow, this is incredibly illustrated. Oh man, okay, great. That's going to make it so much nicer. There he is as Cromwell in Shakespeare's King Henry VIII. I don't know that these pictures are going to be able to do him justice. Probably he has every single production still. There he is in period costume. This came out in when? 1957 for 35 shillings. And this is basically as close as he ever got, I think, to an autobiography. It's done more like a journal, hence the title. So it's not written in a straightforward narrative. It's more glimpses and bits and pieces. But he's a great deal of fun on the page, as long as you don't have to put up with him. And another thing that I noticed that while I was when I was looking through this is correspondence. There are letters here, 3 letters. They are from. Let's see here. Let me get a return address. They are from J.W. Swanson in Champaign, Illinois, and they are to Professor Don Wilmuth at Brown University in Rhode Island. And I read them, and oddly enough, I'm just picky enough, or just weird enough, or just proud enough to Irish Catholic guilt, so that I didn't read them until I looked up to see that both the sender and the recipient were dead, and they both are. They were both drama professors, and they wrote letters to each other, and they're easily legible. And this book was sent as a gift from the teacher, the older of the professors, to the student, the younger of the professors, and obviously was received because it has Wilmuth's obnoxious library stamp on it. He must have tucked the letters in here, and then they both died a long time ago. They both died, 50 years ago. So, and here is the book, having made its journey one way or another all the way to the Brattle sale lot and to my hands on the first week of the year 2021. Uncanny. Edward Craig basically came to a stop. He basically made himself so obnoxious to the theatrical community that they wouldn't have him anymore. No one would work with him. He didn't want to work with anyone unless he had complete control over everything, right down to how actresses arranged their dressing rooms and things like that. There's absurd control freak. So there's a weird, long fallow period. The end of his life was a very long end, in which he did very little except write. And maybe that has discouraged people from writing his biography. What a biography it would be. To be the spiritual son of Henry Irving, to be Ellen Terry's illegitimate son, to have the life that he led, extremely well documented. Have a book like this, and he wrote other things that would help with such an endeavor to make a biography of him, a full dress biography of him. It might not do anything in America, but I bet you could sell it in the UK. Although you'd have to come to America to do it. I know that for a fact, because I have actually seen the archive for Edward Craig is at the University of Texas at Austin. A vast trove of stuff that has never been tapped by anybody. A vast trove of journals and letters and primary documents of all kinds that pertain not only to him, but to Ellen Terry and Henry Irving and the theatrical world of the time. And those boxes just sit there. They are hardly consulted at all. Sooner or later, somebody will write a history of this guy. It would be, believe it or not, it would be very interesting. We get 80 million biographies of Queen Victoria. She also had a long fallow period at the end of her life. It doesn't stop people then. And if it can work for one embittered old queen. Well, anyway. This next one was a gamble, and it's the type of gamble that I lay myself open to all the time. All the time. It's Bruce Catton. So I've done Samuel Eliot Morison, who's a great American historian. Bruce Catton is another great American historian. I didn't know Bruce Catton. I never spent any time sitting and drinking and talking books with him. But I love his work. I think he is the great historian of the American Civil War. And I have Still in a Set of Appomattox, Never Call Retreat, The Coming Fury, and Terrible Swift Sword. But I did not know that when I was at the Brattle. I couldn't rattle those things off. They weren't right in front of me when I was at the Brattle today. Instead, I knew that I had quite a few, and that there was one Bruce Catton volume that I absolutely love that I don't have, and oh my God, what one is it? And you would never guess from that. I do the same thing with Patrick O'Brian. There's one Patrick O'Brian, Aubrey and Matron novel that I don't have. And yet, you would think from that I had no way to remind myself when my phone has a notebook on it. I could jot these things down. Then I'm never without the phone when I'm out and about. I would be able to just call it up and tell which one I need. I don't leave those kinds of notes for myself. It's just insane. But today, it turns out that my guess was correct. I guessed that this was the one I love that I don't have. And I found it. And it's This Hallowed Ground. And Bruce Catton, I had to reinforce this. It was in terrible shape. But I'm incredibly happy to have it. It will go... I have 3 Bruce Catton volumes here and 1 over there. No idea why they're separate, but I will put them all together. Or maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should leave it for the one empty bookcase and see how much of that bookcase I will fill in 2021. I would, at this point, effortlessly turn the camera to show you that bookcase. But when I put the camera on my $4 tripod today to record this video and then adjusted it so that it would be level with my face, the plastic bracket of the tripod broke. Snapped right off like I was from Krypton. So I need a new tripod. Now, that is a case where I'm easily going to spend the money because that tripod is infinitely worth it. But in the meantime, I had to fuss around and use rubber bands and whatnot, and my little statue of Ganesha. So I don't have the ability to turn the camera around at all anymore. I'll have to wait for my new tripod to come in. But in the meantime, I got this. I reinforced it because I absolutely love this work. I just love it. Almost all of it is quotable. I want to quote you one thing here, just give you a taste of what Bruce Catton is like. Winter was approaching, a winter of cold blue moons and frozen fields with deadly rivers winding across landscapes that had a doom on them. There was the Rappahannock coming down from the Virginia Piedmont and broadening out for a lazy, curling route to the sea. The lovely town of Fredericksburg drowsing on its right bank just below the fall line. And in Tennessee, there was Stones River, the market town of Murfreesboro lying just to the south of it, rolling Tennessee farm country all about. 2 rivers and 2 towns, drawing the tide of war to them, with 2 Union armies coming in and 2 Confederate armies making ready for defense. Rappahannock and Stones Rivers would be crossed, and Fredericksburg and Murfreesboro would be occupied, but many young men would die before it was done. I mean, Catton has a way of doing that, where he will, so to speak, scout the ground of where the epic beats of his story are coming. He'll scout the ground ahead of time to give you a sense of where these things were going to happen, so that you don't first hear about them when the first shots are fired. It's going to be tough to resist the temptation to reread this thing just from start to finish. I will try. This next one is a big fat biography. That is spurred by a new release. There's a new release coming out in January, a new biography of Patricia Highsmith. I think we saw it on this channel. I think I hauled it on this channel from the mail. I read it and was not all that happy with it. It seemed squalid in a way that seemed more petty on the part of the author than accurate on the part of Highsmith herself, who could be, let's be sure to say this, very squalid. She's a truly odious person. But nevertheless, the biographer seemed to be exorcising demons at the expense of the subject in that book. Now, I'm not completely sure of that as a judgment. I need to go back to that. When I get the finished copy of that book, I will go back to it and give it a completely open-minded overhaul of a read, this time pencil in hand. But while I was reading, I kept being reminded of the previous Patricia Highsmith biography that I really liked, despite the fact that it's very unconventional. And it was one of the things where I went to the Brattle. I thought, when I was done with my browsing, I thought, okay, I'm going to look inside and see if they have it. And they did. This is by Joan Shenkar, and this is The Talented Miss Highsmith. Truly terrifying cover, but that's okay. This is a strange biography. It's not linear. First of all, the author does provide a linear timeline, but the bulk of the book is thematic. That produces a very weird effect that I at first didn't like, but the more I thought about it and the more I've reflected on it, the more I have come to like it. I haven't reread this in a while, and I noticed that the person who had it before included 2 reviews. They mimeographed 2 reviews, one from the Boston Globe and one from the New York Times. And the New York Times review said that it's a standout work of biography, a great book. And the one from the Globe, same book, probably published in the same week, said that it's a mess, that it's unreadable. So I seem to remember liking it a lot more than the Globe reviewer did, and I swear the Globe reviewer was not me. So I'm going to read this again. I'll read this again in between now, when I have just finished that earlier Patricia Highsmith biography, the new one, and when I read it again, when I read the finished copy that I'm certainly going to get down the line. I will read this in between to sort of, balance things out so I can go into that second read. Just in case I review the new Patricia Highsmith biography, I want to be absolutely sure that I'm being fair to it. This next one is also a biography. It's a dual biography. It's another thing. Excuse me. It's another thing that is going to have. It's had echoes since it came out. It's going to have another echo. There's one coming out in 2022 as well. It's just a perennial temptation that biographers have that they can never seem to resist, and that is to pair Hitler and Stalin. This is Alan Bullock's absolutely enormous dual biography of Hitler and Stalin, which I read when it first came out in the early 90s, I think. And is that right? Was this the early 90s? I wasn't in the reviewing game. I remember that vividly. This came out when I was not 1991. Yep. This came out when I was not in a position to account for it to a readership. And when I was being told by everybody and his brother that since I had left the reviewing world, I couldn't rebuild a readership, that this sort of thing doesn't happen. Turns out it does. If you're careful enough and studious enough and hardworking enough, I have rebuilt a readership, and I would love it. I didn't get a chance to do it. This infuriated me when I first read it, as all pairings of Hitler and Stalin have done that I've ever read. I've read 3 of them, and they all do the same thing. They don't just say parallel, they say equivalent. And Bullock does the same thing. He doesn't explicitly do it, but there is no equivalence here. Hitler was a monster, and Stalin was a far, far, far worse monster. One was really bad, and one was much, much worse. And if you're going to go through, 30 type-packed, single-type pages of references, and then write a book where you don't say that, well, then I don't know what you made of those references. I have no idea what you made of those references. So I'm going to give this another try. It's been all that time since the early 90s since I read it. So maybe it hits that tone less stridently than I thought. Maybe I was on a bit of a kick then. We'll see. This next one is a novel by a novelist who most people don't know. A great novelist working in our midst today that most people don't know. Unfortunately. It's Lawrence Norfolk. And this is his big historical novel, The Pope's Rhinoceros. He mostly does weird historical fantasies. Lampre's Dictionary is the book that introduced me to him, and that is just very strange. It's very strange, but very, very good. And this is the same thing. This is the lovely American edition. I just happened to find a hardcover, and because all these things were dirt cheap, like I've mentioned before, because these things are dirt cheap, you can take a gamble on them. That's what this was. You can indulge in whims. And he boils it up around an actual historical incident where a kingdom in India wanted to sort of bribe Pope Leo X, who was, among other things, excoriated extensively by the Dutch humanist Erasmus, along with his predecessor Julius II. But this kingdom wanted to bribe him by somehow getting him a live rhinoceros from literally the other side of the world. Not an easy thing to do, a tortuously difficult thing to do. And Norfolk takes that kernel, much as he did with Lampre's Dictionary, Lampre's Classical Dictionary, takes that as a little kernel and spins from it an amazing, fantastical story. This is such a brilliant author. I don't know why more people don't know about him. But I mention his books all the time, and this is the closest they ever got, I think, to a really big splash in the American publishing world. And nobody did me the kindness of including clipped reviews from this thing, so I'll have to go and find them on my own. But again, this came out in the 90s. This came out when I was not reviewing. Yeah, 1996. So I never got a chance to praise it on my own, but I'm praising it now, and I haven't reread it since then. So, and then the last thing that we'll do with here, this hideously long Brattle, Return to Battle, is an anthology. This is by Andrew Delbanco, and this is Writing New England, an anthology from the Puritans to the present. That is a 1920s painting of a little idyllic little New England town. You will see a horse-drawn carriage. You will see pigs. You will see cats. You will see humans. You will not see any dogs. There will be no dogs in this picture, but nevertheless, I love anthologies, and I especially love New England anthologies. I have one right here in this room that I hauled last year. I had this when it first came out and recall liking it, but the thing about anthologies is that it doesn't really matter in the end how well you know their individual contents. There are some writers in here I know much better than others. There are some writers in here you just expect to find them. The key to a good anthology, and I remember this being a really good anthology, is the genius of the editor to make those pieces combine into a whole that is unrecognizable, a whole that is not as predictable as the individual parts. I remember this satisfying in that regard, but I haven't read it in a long time. So there you go. That was my return to the Brattle Bookshop, my return to Brattle and Battle. So we have, oh no, these are on the wrong side. Well, we'll give it a try. We have Writing New England, nice New England anthology, good to have if you live here. The Pope's Rhinoceros by Lawrence Norfolk. I believe this was the book that he wrote right after Lamprey's Dictionary. Then we have Hitler and Stalin by Alan Bullock. I remember this being really good with Hitler, really good about Hitler, just in isolation. We'll see how the rest of it goes. Oh no, I have to reach for these things. Then The Talented Miss Highsmith. Here, I wonder if we can do this with the other hand. Can we do that with the other hand? Is that going to work? Well, we'll give it a try. Then This Hallowed Ground, Bruce Catton. The main Bruce Catton that I didn't have that I wanted. Index of the Story of My Days by Edward Gordon Craig. His theater memoir, his I Was Always Right memoir. Puritan's Progress by Arthur Train, the author of Tut, the Tut books that are gone. A Month in the Country in a boxless folio society that has illustrations. Oh no. No, it needs to be the other hand. I'm going to have to work out the ergonomics here. I'm going to have to work them out again now that the tripod is dead. Then we have The Maritime History of Massachusetts by Samuel Eliot Morison, and Admiral of the Ocean Sea about Christopher Columbus, who we would not want to take to the prom. Then we have Back to the Future, Backing into the Future by Bernard Knox, the great classicist, and The Longest Silence by the great novelist Thomas McGuane, who I called him great all throughout that description. I should also say I strongly recommend his books. If you're at a used bookstore and you come across a novel by Thomas McGuane, get it. You're really going to like it. You're really, really going to like it. And there you go. Good Lord. So that was my first foray of 2021 to the Brattle. And we will see how many of these things are keepers. Those of you who know me fairly well will probably be able to guess that a couple of these things are. This Hallowed Ground. The two Morison books are definitely keepers. And we'll see which of the rest of them are. They weren't expensive, so it was easy to gamble. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, for God's sake. I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.